They don't understand that the friendships that they have at this age in life are one of the most important things for them. They need Christian friends. They need good Christian friends to encourage them, to be with, to hang out with. That's so influential and forming for them. And you're right, they don't really grasp that.
This is the Men Refined podcast.
Hey friends, welcome to the Men Refined podcast. I have my good friend Jason Spears. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here, Rafael. How are you?
Man, it's great to have you here in the studio today. I wanted to talk a little bit about this very profound topic about raising daughters as dads. I think many of us don't think too much about it. Usually when we pick up any magazine, any teen magazine from any bookstore or whatever, you know, I'm gonna say a couple of headlines that I've seen lately, and we can expand from that. How to flirt with your crush is one of those headlines. The better body plan, it's another headline. The truth about guys and girls, that's another headline. I don't want my daughters nowhere near these kind of things. I think it's very dangerous because they're not going to get much truth out of these silly headlines, and they're very dangerous magazines. That tells me that now these kids, our daughters, are actually looking for some sort of affirmation or trying to understand their journey as daughters, as women, because they don't have that in the home. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's an absence from dads not investing in their daughters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when I hear those headlines that you just read, it is the epitome of what our world or our culture is telling our daughters what they need to be thinking about and what's important. And I mean, at a very basic level, I think being a dad, part of my job is to help orient my kids toward God and toward the world, to know, you know, what does God say is true about me and what does the world say is true about me? So it's definitely a helping them learn who they are. That's so important, their identity. And also to know, hey, this is what the world's going to say about women and about girls. This is what the world's going to say is important. And I hope as a dad, I can prepare them for that.
One thing I also wanted to clarify is we don't usually get much help from Christian books either. There's not a lot of that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, parenting is hard. I will say, I have 3 daughters, by the way. I have one in elementary, one in middle, and one in high school. So we're at 3 different schools, essentially. And I know some of the people that I would say they're the best parents. They do things the right way. They really are great parents. And then others who I'm like, well, that's not exactly how I do things. But it's interesting because some of the people that I think with the best parents, some of them have very rebellious children who, you know, and then some of the parents that, I wouldn't do it that way, end up having, you know, their kids grow up and end up being great contributing, you know, members of our society. And so I say that because we can't have control over the results when we parent. We can do things that are right. We can do things that we believe are good for our children, but we can't control the results. We just cannot. And so many people are scared to write books when people follow all the advice of their books, and it doesn't work for them. So I think maybe there's just a fear to put stuff out there that people might try and have not worked for them.
Who you think will be? I'm not sure if certified will be the word that I'm looking for, but who you think can actually speak on a subject about raising daughters in a way that works, to say the least. I will say that are those who have been there. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good starting point. If you're raising women, if you're raising daughters to become women, to be that wife, if you did that and things somehow they work out okay, somehow God had his hand in that journey, I think those parents, that dad, that family should have some sort of a say on how did that work. Because there's a lot of that. There's not a lot of that even in our Christian bookstores, right? There's not a lot of that. You can find books, but some of them, if you really go deeper into what this book is talking about, there's a lot of feminist push even within the church. Even within the church is the most common denominator on talks between older ladies and younger ladies is you gotta finish your college. It's a huge push about finishing your degrees, whatever profession you want to go in, and do what you need to do. And then after you accomplish all that, then find a man. So you have a huge amount, a big percentage of women trying to find men. They're on their mid-30s now. What do you think you're going to find? And now you want to raise a family and start it? That's difficult. Mm-hmm. That's very difficult. So I think I will say we need more men that have paved the way to talk about these subjects. Because we need to hear from those guys. I'm in the middle of it. I need all the wisdom.
How old are your daughters, Rafael?
16 and 13.
Okay.
And our oldest is going to be a senior next year. So I'm in the middle of this. Mm-hmm. I'm still trying to figure this out.
Yep, me too. Me too, absolutely. And you know, once they get into the teenage years, especially the hormones going through their bodies and everything, it's just it just magnifies many of the feelings that they're naturally feeling already at school. Some of them positive feelings, some of them negative feelings, and to come alongside that as a father and be patient and understanding and compassionate and gentle, those kind of things. That's what I hope to be. And I'm not always that way. That's what I hope to be. I hope to learn. I hope to be a learner and really understand my daughter's heart. I hope to be a student of my daughter's heart.
How do you do that, Jason?
Well, you know, it takes a lot of time. I'm still learning. I don't know. I'm still learning. Just listening and really, yeah, like just being patient, asking good questions. And many times as a dad, I know, okay, this is what really is going on in your heart. But it's helpful for me to sit down and actually have a conversation with her. And my wife is really good at this. Sometimes one of our daughters will want to just unload everything emotionally at the end of the day. You know, it's past bedtime and all of a sudden they just start talking, you know, and it's like in those moments when they're just talking, I need to be ready. My wife needs to be ready to just sit and patiently listen because they want to share what's going on in their lives. They want to share about this friend that's mean to them or something really exciting that happened. And to be able to listen to them in those moments and not shut them down is something that I hope to grow a little more in. Many times, I mean, honestly, many times it's the end of the day and I don't want to just sit there and listen, and it may be a half hour, it may be an hour, it may be longer, but I know that I need to grow in that. And
you're already shutting down for the day, right? And this is when they come in and I say, "Hey, do you know that this girl blah 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 blah,
yeah,
blah 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 blah," and I'm like, "Okay, here we go. Can we just do this like earlier? I'm already shutting down for the day." Yeah. But I think as Christians families, I can only speak of Christians families, and I would like to add congregations also, because it takes a village, it takes a church to raise kids. Encouraging our daughters to grow in their heart, soul, love affairs with God. I think to serve Him, I think is a priority. I think serving it should be a most as we raise our daughters, making sure that they know that they need to be serving others since they're little. I think it's a good indicator on how they could turn out. And I will say how they could turn out, because you never know at the end. God is sovereign, but you don't know what will happen in our daughters' lives and mine. We can only hope that God, in His power and His goodness, can protect them from everything that is going on around. I think that they get to be humble towards God, right? To understand the different ways that God is preparing them on this journey, and they can be able to trust Him, but also see that as an example of who God is. So we play an important part on all this journey, and if we don't have it right, boy, it will be a generational mess.
Yeah, so men out there, whether we like it or not, we influence our daughters when we're in parenting mode and when we're not in parenting mode. We influence our daughters' view of who they may imagine God to be. Many times, the one person in anyone's life that influences their view of God the most is their dad, whether you're a son or a daughter. That's a heavy weight to carry, knowing that, wow, I might have a part to play in how my daughter views who God is. So that's one thing. I mean, we could talk a lot about that, but then there's just how you live your life in general. How do you engage with other people? How do you work? What is your attitude towards your work? Or how is your attitude towards your spouse or your girlfriend? What is your attitude towards the world? Like, our daughters are watching us. You're modeling to them, whether you're thinking about it or not. You are modeling to them. And much of the character that's built in them is built by watching you.
Raising godly women involves teaching her about God. And I think helping her also develop a strong relationship with Him. And this cannot be done through regular prayer, but it should be included. Bible study, participation in church activities, right? Talking about setting up spaces for our kids, for our daughters to grow in Christ, around other believers and the church involvement. It also involves modeling godly behaviors and values in your own life as men, and helping your daughter understand the importance of living a life that is pleasing to God. And we can define that in many ways. How do we please God? But I think we can touch in a couple of specific things that I think you can do to help raise a godly woman. Number one will be encouraging her to read and study the Bible regularly. I mean, this is something that sometimes it gets out of whack. Sometimes we start very good doing this, and then life happens, and then all of a sudden our wives come back to us and it's like, hey, when was the last time that we sit down as a family and just went through the Bible, pick up some Bible passages and just have these conversations? That's a dagger to your heart. Right? Sometimes life happens, and if we're not self-aware of what's going on in our lives, if we don't take control of our schedules to really put in paper, I'll say paper because I like to see things, but if we don't make an effort on putting in paper what is important in our lives, what's how we're going to manage our weekly schedule and what are the non-negotiables within our schedules, it's going to be long gone. We're not going to pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. We just won't.
Figuring out priorities and then living those out, living your life in light of those top priorities is one of the most important things that a young man can do to set themselves up well in their marriage, as a father, in their work. You're right. It needs to be a priority, and whether that's writing it down or having a prayer list of things you're praying for, or a list of people that you're coming into contact in those areas, living out your priorities is important. But again, your daughters, your sons, they're watching you. And so one thing that we try to do, my wife and I each have our own kind of quiet time. You know, we each have our own things we go through for our own quiet time. I'm reading through the whole Bible with one of my Bible studies. And so I have a choice sometimes whether I want to lock myself in a room and do it by myself because I know I can focus better, or I can go out where the girls are hanging out and open my Bible and do it where they can see me do that. And I know that it might be a little harder for me to focus, but I want them to see that rhythm in my life. I want them to see me living out that priority. And then we sometimes have, I guess we try to do this at least once a week, but we gather the whole family together and we'll do kind of what you said. We'll open up the Bible, we'll read a passage of scripture, and we'll talk through it and talk about how it pertains, how it applies to our life right now in all the different spheres that we're in. And those are important times too, because you're helping your daughters understand how to read scripture, helping them see the context of a certain passage, and that it's actually that scripture is living and real, and that God uses it to speak to you in real time, that it's not something that was just written years and years ago. So that's just one small piece of teaching our daughters what it might look like to walk with the Lord for a lifetime.
I think just to study the Bible is not one of the only things that will make them be totally the kid that we want them to be, right? I think it's more than that, and I think teaching them about the importance of praying and be fully dependent on God's will. Mm-hmm. For them to understand that's challenging nowadays, because kids now, they want to see what's the ROI on everything that they do. What am I going to get out of this, right? When is the answer coming? I need to know what's going on. If I pray this, when am I going to see the results of my prayer? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of instant gratification nowadays that our kids are going through and are trying to handle that. And, I think this will help them develop a personal relationship with God and find strength and guidance in the times of need. But to teach them that importance of being devoted to prayer is so important. And at the same time, it's so challenging because, let's be honest, it is challenging for us to just stay in that prayer season and not seeing any results. That's where our faith grows, but it's still very challenging for men to be fully devoted to prayer in our journey, in our day-to-day life. That's real. That's real life.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of something that happened with one of my daughters. It's a very hard thing that happened in her life. And we were talking to her, and she's like, I pray about it, but God doesn't answer. Like, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. And her perspective was that, prayer really doesn't work, so I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so I was just happened to be reading through James recently, and talking about hardships. I mean, right at the very beginning in James 1, verse 2. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow."
Yeah.
And so I think helping our daughters see that, God's not going to just remove every difficult thing in your life because he loves you. But because he loves you, he's going to allow very difficult things in your life to help develop your endurance, your faith in him, and that it's actually not a bad thing. It's a hard thing, yes, but we get to see God, come through. So it was just an opportunity. That hard thing in her life was an opportunity to disciple her and to show her, well, this is what God says about hard things in our life. And then the very last chapter of James, chapter 5, verse 13, talks about prayer. It says, well, are any of you suffering hardships? You should pray.
Yeah.
Are any of you happy?
You should pray.
You should sing praises. Are you sick? You should call the elders to come to pray and to pray for healing and all this kind of stuff. And it goes through all these things. We're to pray in all circumstances. So again, it was an opportunity to just teach my daughter, God is always there. He's always listening to you. He wants to talk to you like a friend.
I think another point, obviously, we talk about serving, and I think help her find ways to serve others and make a positive impact in her community. It should be right there into those points on how we raise godly women, because this could include volunteering, participating in church activities and service projects, etc., or simply just showing kindness and compassion to those around her. And I think that what has worked for us as a family with our daughters is the serving aspect to it. We consider ourselves a very serving family overall. As a family, we serve the Lord. That's one of our lives verses. And we serve the Lord. In our home, that's what we do. We serve the Lord. And what is critical is, and early in our family, we decided that we were just going to serve the church in any capacity. Whatever the church is in need, we're just going to try to meet the need. And as our kids, all three of our kids grow up, our oldest, obviously my stepson, since he was probably 3, all they know is church life. So all three of our kids really grow up in the church, grow up serving, pulling chairs in, etc., just doing everything that is needed for any church activity. So that's all they know so far. And I thank God that he has provided us with such a great opportunity so our kids can be part of that. It's not something that we are doing just by ourselves, which we have seen through the years. Many families, even very involved marriages within the church, but their kids are not. They're not part of it. They're nowhere to be found. And, sometimes it's challenging for me. And we sometimes don't understand what's behind closed doors. So I think we should have that grace, because every family is a struggle, right? Mm-hmm. But for us, it's been a key subject in our family. We're just serving. Mm-hmm. We're just going to serve in any capacity. And we push our girls. Mm-hmm. We push them. Yes, I said it. Mm-hmm. We don't just tell them you should. We tell them you will. And
so let me ask you this, Rafael. So in that, I love that you guys do that, by the way, that it's just a thing that your family does. And you've made that a standard, that you serve, you give, you serve in the church, whatnot. What has been your kids' attitudes? Has it always been a positive attitude when you're making them do this, or has it been mixed?
I will say it's been some sort of like an inertia in that aspect, because that's, again, they grew up on it. So they grew up seeing us serving together at any capacity, cleaning up bathrooms, whatever. We've done it all. Like, seriously, we've done it all. And so now as they're growing, they're actually, we probably said a couple of times, hey, you should be serving here, or find something to do, or we say find a way to get involved, or we just find that thing that they need and we just involve them, right? And they just roll with it, I'll say. I mean, sometimes it's like, I don't feel like going or doing, but it's very momentary. And I thank God, He's been always in everything that we do. And somehow, I hope that our kids keep doing this on their own without us putting them in those places and assign them the directions. But when they do it gladly. Like, they love that. Our oldest daughter, she loves to hang out with the kiddos, and she serves in the middle school ministry. And I mean, sometimes it's rough, because it's a lot of commitment. Now she's 16, so there's more. They're very committed. But they travel together with some of those things, and she enjoys the connection with the younger girls, and she likes that. She likes that she has that some sort of responsibility, even though sometimes she's like, oh my God, I have so much homework and I feel like I don't have time to do this. And, sometimes we have that talk, and I say, well, you need to manage your time a bit better because you made a commitment. Yeah. And now you got people depending on you. And sometimes I play that card, like, that special card, that special family card, when we say, this is who we are, this is what we do as a family. And you being part of this family, this is what needs to be done. And I don't know, people sometimes don't like when I say that, because it feels that I am forcing my girls into do something that they don't feel like. Well, but this is not about feelings, man. This is just not about feelings. I feel like not going to church today. Well, buddy, this is when you need to go to church today.
I agree with you completely. And we do the same thing. There's a few things that we require our girls to do.
Yeah, non-negotiables, right?
And it's interesting because I exercise, I work out, I lift weights, and so
let's go, man. Let's go.
When I start working out, it is painful for like days afterwards. It's just painful. But when you use that muscle, and it doesn't have to be every day. I mean, it could just be a few times a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. You get stronger, and it feels good to get stronger, right? And you start enjoying it. And I think it's the same way with our girls reading their Bibles, praying, serving others. It might be painful at first. They might have a bad attitude about it. They're like, I don't want to do that again. This happened or whatever. But as they exercise that muscle, you're building in them strength and endurance to do those things, and then they enjoy them. They really do enjoy them, and it's building character in them as they do it. So I would just like to say, dads, it's okay to make your kids do things that they don't want to do. And if they have a bad attitude about it, make them still do it. I mean, that should not change the fact whether you're making them do it or not, the bad attitude. It should not change it at all.
I think things get better in time. And I think, I hate to say always I think. It's like, dude, you need to improve your vocabulary. I apologize. English is my second language, so I'm still learning. My English is not very good looking. But I will say this. If you start, since they're little, if you start doing this early in your family days, it gets better in time because now you're shaping them. And there's, I said non-negotiable. I don't think in this area, it's not just non-negotiable. This is just what we do. This is who we are. So if you start doing this since they're little, that's all your kids gonna know. That's all they know. Sundays, we go to church. We serve, and we go to church.
Yep.
We serve one, we join one, right? We always done that. And they grow up in this mode of serving one and assisting another. it is harder when we as men, years go by, we don't pay attention, we don't decide to act this way, to think 15, 20 years from now. We're just going through the hoops, the steps, and now our kids are 12, 13, and now you want to force them? Mm-hmm. That's tough.
It is.
That is tough.
But there's some people who are in that situation right now that are probably thinking, well, what do I do? Because I missed my opportunity.
Yeah.
And I would say to you,
difficult.
The word that comes to my mind is repent. And that's a Bible word that basically means I need to agree with God that I was on the wrong track, and I'm going to do a 180 and change the way I was doing something. I'm going to do a 180 and change the way I was doing something. And so if you have to come to your kids and say, you know what, I was wrong to, not lead our family in this way before. And now I really want to do what's right. And I want to change the way we do life as a family, and we're going to go this opposite direction. And you're leading your family in a way that they need to go. And I know that your kids are older and they have things that they want to do that might be different than what you want to do, but it's still okay to lead as a dad and to make them do things that you know are good for them, that will build character, that will lead them to the Lord. It's okay. They're not going to hate you once God starts moving in their lives. They're not going to hate you. Don't worry about worst case scenarios. You have to do what's best for your family and for your kids.
You said something critical when we started this conversation, is that our kids are always looking. They're always paying attention. And I think another important point when we're raising godly women is we should model godly behaviors and values in our own lives. Because if we're telling them to do something and we're not doing it, and they're not seeing it in us, they're picking it up so quickly, they're just not going to do it. They're just not going to do it. And that includes being honest, like you said, repent, tell them exactly where you make mistakes and how you want to recover this family with kindness and selfless, and as well as living that life that is consistent with your faith. Because faith without action is dead. So if we want our kids to follow us, we need to be good leaders. And good leaders, we have to be an example. We have to be somebody that they want to follow. So we have to follow through certain things so they can then follow us. And many just don't do that. Well, you got to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But the kids don't see that in you. Mm-hmm. You also said that even as you are going through your Bible studies, that you prefer to be in a place where your kids can see you reading the Bible instead of just being in your office, closed door, and going through your studies. And I think there's a space for that. And one of my pastors, there's a cool story that he tells about how his son sees him. One of the most critical moments on his son's life is seeing his dad every morning when he wakes up, the son wakes up, seeing his dad in his chair reading the Bible right next to the window. And that has stick with this guy forever. That's the vision that he has of his dad as he was growing up. So that stuff stays. Kids are watching, and that's what is always in their mind. So when somebody talks about their dad, this is the first thing that comes to their mind is their dad reading the Bible, their dad studying the Bible, and being united with God. And that's beautiful.
It absolutely is.
That's beautiful.
I wanted to speak a little bit to how we respond as dads, many times to our kids' behavior. And many times I have a tendency to get angry and say some things that I wish I could take back, like, what were you thinking? What's wrong with you? The what's wrong with you is is not a good thing to say, because kids internalize that.
Like what? What are you thinking? I want to know why you say that, because I say that a lot. So I want to learn, why would you say that they don't? I mean, sorry for interrupting you. I know where you're going with, but I want to know more about where you're coming from.
Yep. You want to link their behavior to a choice that they made, a bad choice that they made, I think, is what I would rather do than having them think, well, what is wrong with me? You know, did God make a mistake making me or something? Like, am I a loser? I've just said that too many times in the past, and I've had to apologize to my kids. And there's a funny story about one of my daughters who had a marker, and she wrote all over the car seat in our van. And so my wife, like, well, I got to unload the groceries. I got to, worry about the other kids or whatnot. So I'm just going to give her a cleaning spray bottle and a rag, and she can't come out of the van until it's clean, And so she leaves her out there for a while, and she comes out there, and she had sprayed the spray bottle all over the van, just dripping wet everywhere, all over the van. And she looks up at my wife, and she's like, "Do I get paid for this?"
Wow.
And so she's like, "No, sweetie, this is, you have to do this because you made the choice to write on the car seat. That was a bad choice. You're not going to get paid for cleaning it up." And so it's just hilarious. Our sweet daughter, she's like a 10 on the cuteness scale. And this was, with big brown eyes looking at us. So
did she finish her cleaning?
Well, she had a lot of cleaning up to do from her cleaning.
Yeah. I think the next tool will be to encourage her to develop a strong relationship with other believers. Man, what an important piece this is, because sometimes girls feel alone in school because they just feel that they're different the way they are, how their families are different from the secular relationships that they may encounter at school. And I think we need to encourage them to develop those strong relationships with other believers. That doesn't mean that they're going to just separate themselves from the world. On the contrary, but they need to protect themselves also from the world. And surrounding herself with godly friends will help her grow in her faith, and also will provide support and accountability as she starts navigating life on her own.
Yep.
We have stories about, in many instances, one of our daughters, sometimes it's just like she didn't have quote unquote friends, right? And as a dad, like, what do you do? Okay, what do we do? And then we call mom. We get mom into the picture. Okay, mom, what do you do? This is yours. This is not me. That's a mistake. Mm-hmm. That's a mistake. I think we tend sometimes to not even to negotiate, but we're trying to split responsibilities. And sometimes we are the ones that need to be responsible and dictate the pace and the direction that we should go as a family, and explain the vision, where we are, why we're here, why we should act this way versus another way. And creating those spaces for our daughters, I think is very important for them. Because sometimes they just don't know the decisions that they need to make on their own. They just don't understand sometimes.
Yeah, and they don't understand that the friendships that they have at this age in life are one of the most important things for them. They need Christian friends. They need good Christian friends to encourage them, to be with, to hang out with. That's so influential and forming for them. And you're right, they don't really grasp that. My oldest daughter, many times, she'll be overwhelmed with the amount of homework she has or whatnot. And she's like, I don't want to go to youth group tonight. I don't want to go to church. It's just going to take too much time and whatnot. And then we ask a little more questions. It's like, well, you have a couple days to still do that. Youth group is a high priority. Do you know why? Like, this is what you need to fill you up. This is going to bring you joy. You've been sitting doing homework, which is, it's important to do well at school, but this, being around your friends at youth group is more important, and here's why. And so you're right, we have to kind of just explain, and maybe your kids are at an age where you don't have to explain. They're just like, you're going to be a part of this because it's going to be good for you, and try to help it to be an exciting thing for younger kids to be a part of something that is good for them, that they're not old enough to make a decision on it. So
should we force them?
Yeah, I think it's okay to. Yeah.
Because they're not going to make the best decisions. Mm-hmm. So why will you let a kid decide on their well-being mm-hmm. if they don't have the capacity to understand what even the best well-being for themselves is? And many dads make that mistake. Well, she says she doesn't want to go.
Right. I don't want to make her because she's not going to like me.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Our goal is not to have our kids like us. That is for sure. That is.
Where does that come from, you think? When dads, and you hear that all the time. You ask somebody, I just text a dude, it's like, hey, your daughter is coming to youth, whatever my daughter is asking. And then 20 minutes later, a text comes in like, oh, she says she doesn't want to go. Oh, she says she doesn't feel like going. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes my daughters, they come up with this like, oh, let's say there's a retreat somewhere. It's like, well, none of my friends are going. I say, okay, great. That's even better, so you can make new friends. Like, this is the opportunity. Mm-hmm. So we push them that way. Eventually they start understanding, right? But at those beginning moments, it's hard for them to understand that. But that's it. That's life. That means that, like, what are you gonna do if they don't go? You still gotta show up.
Yes. So yeah, it's
and create other relationships.
Because we want. God is concerned with our heart, not our behavior necessarily. Like, God is ultimately concerned with the condition of our hearts, right? Mm-hmm. And we should also be concerned with the condition of our kids' hearts. But many times, in order to get our hearts to the right place, we have to do something. And we are helping our kids do something or create habits that shepherd the heart, that grow the heart. And so we can't just say, well, our kids don't want to do those things. Then we're just saying no. It's like, an athlete. Well, he doesn't feel like working out, but he wants to be a star athlete.
Yeah.
He doesn't feel like practicing, but he wants to be a star athlete. So are we going to let our kids just be like, are we going to get mad at the coach when the coach benches our kid? Well, our kid doesn't feel like practicing. Well, the coach is going to say he's got to be at practice in order to play, or he's not going to be a good player. So it's the same sort of thing. We're helping our kids show up to practice. We are teaching them things like the Bible says, raise your children in the way they should go. How does it go?
Yeah. Raise your children in the way they should go so they will not depart from it.
So when they're older, they will not depart from it. Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah. I think we've even gone to the extent of incentivizing our girls to have consistent quiet time with different things. If they are having consistent quiet time, if they're serving people at church, if they're doing some things like that are consistent in their lives, it's okay to add incentives because they're just getting used to it. They're practicing, they're getting used to these habits and hopefully developing these habits for a lifetime.
In closing, Jason, what do you think are some of the key tools that we have as dads, or what is needed for us to get better at raising daughters? You could mention one or two, or what's in your mind right now in the journey that you're in. You have 3 daughters, you're dealing with that. Your oldest is?
My oldest is 16.
16, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if you will speak to your younger self, right? Because I think, as we start this journey, we have no idea what we're getting into. And I think many of us as men are in the same boat, trying to understand, trying to gather data, information, so we can make the best educated decision that we have. Some of us get wisdom from the Lord. from other godly men, asking questions to those who have paved the way. But if you will have to say one or two things to your younger self before even knowing that God was going to give you 3 daughters, what would that be, though?
Yeah, I think of a couple things. I think the first thing I mentioned before is become a student of their heart. Like, look below the surface, look behind their behaviors to try to figure out what's really going on in the heart. And that takes time, it takes patience, it takes questions. You need to spend time with them to learn what's really going on and build that trust so they feel free to share with you. Learn their hearts. The other thing I'd say is, how is your relationship with the Lord? What are your practices, your spiritual practices in your life? Are you trusting the Lord with hard things in your life? Because they're watching you. So I would say if you're winning at parenting is trusting the Lord, is following Jesus, and having your kids see you do that.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think raising a godly woman involves teaching and modeling Christian values. I put that at the top. Encouraging spiritual growth, however it works for you and your family, helping them develop a strong sense of who she is and her personal relationship with God, encouraging them on that, making spaces for them to grow around other kids with the same values. And I think that's some of the steps. And it could be more, but in generalizing, I think we just have to keep an eye on our daughters. You say earning their trust and understanding their hearts. And I think that takes time, takes awareness, and take for us that to be engaged with them. I know if my daughter is hiding something just by looking in her eyes. So simple.
Yeah,
I can pick it up so quickly. I know. And I ask her 3 times. Once she starts crying, I know. That's it. That's all it takes. Because it takes time. It takes a lot of investment on knowing your daughters. We didn't talk much, but I think dating them and showing them what a man looks like, I think is huge too.
That's one thing that we hadn't talked about yet, but I think in the context of that, you want to pursue your daughters and date them so they know how a real man should treat them. Like, they know, they have their expectations high when guys are, asking them out on dates or whatnot. You want their expectations to be high. I want my girls' expectations to be high. But I would say one thing that goes along with that is your daughters are longing to hear you say you're beautiful. And but that takes, I wanted to define what that means. It doesn't just say like you're beautiful, your outward beauty is beautiful. Like, that's good. You can tell them that. You can compliment them on their eyes, on their hair, how they look, how they're dressed or whatnot. That's important. But I think I want guys to focus on calling out the beauty that you see in their character and how they treat others, how they give their time to serve here or there, or how they had compassion on this kid or that kid. It's those sort of things that are beautiful that we have opportunities to speak into and essentially define what beauty is in their lives. They can think, well, my dad calls me beautiful, but then he talks about all these things that I do that are beautiful, not just how I look. And that's what we want developed in our girls and are cultivated in their hearts, is God cares about the inward beauty, And so I just want to encourage you to call out those things.
Jason, once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for taking your time and being here. I do appreciate that. And I hope that if you're listening to this episode, anything that we spoke today, any conversation out of this conversation will help you in any way, will encourage you in any way. And if it does, please consider rating this episode, sharing it with somebody else. It will definitely mean the world to us. as we invest in us, invest in you. As you listen to this, thank you again for doing that. Thank you for having us in your playlist and your podcast list, however you want to call it. We're praying for you. And thanks again.
Thanks, Rafael. It was fun.